own the copyrights, and keep all the money made from the revolutionary music. Many consider Bob Dylan to be the finest 20th century songwriter. For more than 60 years, he has been a source of joy and inspiration in the music business. He has a reputation for having unique songwriting abilities. Topics like as politics, societal vices, and poetry dominated his song lyrics. There have been many tales and assumptions about his life, compounded by the power and legacy of his music. From his shifting religious views to his many failed relationships, the criticism he received, and finally, a life-altering incident that prompted introspection. Bob's life was a whirlwind of contradictions. Even though everyone was afraid he would deny it, Bob Dylan ultimately came clean at the age of 83. The specifics of this startling discovery will be discussed today. However, let's go into his early life and work first. Early life and career. Bob Dylan's parents originally gave him the name Robert Allen Zimmerman. He entered this world on May 24, 1941, in Duluth, Minnesota, at St. Mary's Hospital. His childhood was marked by simplicity and modesty, since he was brought up in a humble environment. Abram Zimmerman and Beatrice Stone were his biological parents. Beatty was the common name for his mother, Beatrice, and they belonged to a tiny Jewish group. Many people trace Dylan's family tree back to Odessa, Ukraine, of his grandparents Zygmunt and Anna Kyrgyz, who fled the deadly pogroms in 1905 in an effort to escape the city's Jewish population. Florence and Ben Stone were among Dylan's maternal ancestors. They were Jews from Lithuania, who also came to America in 1902. He spent his whole childhood in Duluth with his parents. Infected with polio when he was 6 years old, his father, Alan, was hospitalized. His family was forced to relocate to Hibbing, Minnesota, his maternal homeland, a tiny town, due to this. Since Dylan's family remained in Hibbing for a while, he spent most of his formative years and adolescence here. Alan was the son of a furniture and electronics company owner and the brother of his father. During that time, Dylan was introduced to a few gadgets via this company. Growing up in an environment where his father and uncle ran an electronics store had a profoundly beneficial impact on Dylan, who developed a profound appreciation for music via the radio equipment he used. As he matured, his devotion to music intensified. He was often observed listening to blues and country music for hours on end. He had a deep affection for Elvis Presley and Little Richard. Dylan eventually started his band while still a student at Hibbing High School. At the time, he was a member of many bands, including the Golden Chords. One of the band's signature sounds was covering the rock and roll songs of other artists, particularly ones that Dylan loved. They once played the song "Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay" by Danny and the Juniors. A school talent show was the setting for this performance. An incident that occurred during this talent event has long been used as a punchline when discussing Dylan's early life. On this particular day, the principal of the school entered the venue and disconnected the microphone due to the excessively high sound level. Many would agree that this was both hilarious and humiliating. Yet it didn't deter Dylan in the slightest from following his dreams. Everyone in his 1959 high school yearbook knew that Dylan followed in the footsteps of his musical heroes, Little Richard and Robert Zimmerman. So they made fun of him by calling him Robert Zimmerman in the yearbook, along with Bobby V. He temporarily appeared that same year as Elston Gunn, a character who played the piano and made clapping noises. In September 1959, he relocated to Minneapolis after graduating from high school. The University of Minnesota was supposed to be his destination. But after just 1 year of college, Dylan decided to leave in May of 1960 because his music was so important to him, and he worried he wouldn't have enough time to focus on it while he was a student. Then he moved into the fraternity home of Sigma Alpha Mu. While he was there, he became an integral member of the campus folk band and began playing at the 10 O'Clock Scholar, a coffee shop near the university. Conversely, folk music bestowed upon him the gift of gab, allowing him to recount tales rooted in reality and convey profound emotions, whether they depressing, hopeful, or everything in between. In hindsight, it is clear that this change in taste in music laid the groundwork for talent, flair, and craftsmanship in the musical industry. Until this point, many still called him Robert Zimmerman. His decision to use Bob Dylan as his stage name came at this stage. The work of the renowned Welsh poet Dylan Thomas served as an inspiration, and he ultimately opted to coin the name Bob Dylan rather than Dillian, as he revealed in his book. In a 2004 interview, he expressed his belief that individuals are sometimes born with the incorrect name. So, in such situations, it's up to the person to determine whether to alter their name or stay the same. In 1961, Dylan uprooted his life and headed for the Big Apple. He did this a year after he dropped out of college, so he could focus on his music, maybe become famous, and see Woody Guthrie, who had been an inspiration to him for a long time. Legendary musician Woody Guthrie was fighting a serious case of Huntington's illness at the time. He began therapy at Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital after his admission. Dylan has often spoken about how much of an influence Woody had on his career as a musician, and how much he loved and respected him. The fact that Guthrie's music embodied every facet of America's authentic spirit was one of the most unique reasons for Dylan's strong connection to her. He continued by saying that his music might address the issues faced by everyday people. Dylan insisted on calling himself Guthrie's greatest disciple at all times. He really had an unhealthy obsession with Woody Guthrie. Due to this, he paid Guthrie many visits throughout his time in New York. Because of this, he was also able to meet Ramblin' Jack Elliott, who had been Guthrie's protege and eventually became his buddy. When Dylan arrived in New York City in February 1961, he had finally found his way. Around Greenwich Village, in particular, he began performing at a number of nightclubs. Even though most of the people he encountered at the time were already well established in folk music, he also began networking and collaborating with new artists. Among those he crossed paths with were Odetta, Fred Neil, Dave Van Ronk, and the Clancy Brothers. He eventually became well known for his exceptional vocal technique and performing flair. Robert Shelton, a critic for the New York Times, gave him an outstanding review in September of that year, which was a watershed moment in his life. Robert described Dylan as a unique folk song stylist and praised his performance at Goethe's Folk City in his piece. The review that Robert wrote had a profound effect on his professional life and was able to reach influential people in his field. Even yet, Dylan also had success around this time when he played harmonica on the third album by the famous folk singer Carolyn Hester. Producer John Hammond took notice of his exceptional harmonica playing. Dylan finally signed with Columbia Records after a long period of trying. Released in March 1962, Bob Dylan was Dylan's first studio album. Blues, gospel, and traditional folk music comprised the first album. Talk About New York and Song to Woody were two of the original tracks. He composed and performed the song Song to Woody in honor of his musical hero, Woody Guthrie. He only managed to sell 5,000 copies of the record in its first year, so it wasn't exactly a commercial smash. Though he was only starting out, Dylan was able to carve out a niche for himself in the market thanks to this brilliant move. He has a stellar reputation for being a consistent and resilient individual. This has been there from the beginning, and he kept going full steam ahead with his music career even though his CDs didn't sell very well, officially changing his name to Bob Dylan and signing a management contract with Albert Grossman, who remained his manager until 1970. Both took place in August 1962. In the business world, his manager Grossman had a reputation for being a tyrant. Disagreements with record companies, producers, and other artists were commonplace throughout his career. They were well aware of his combative personality and approach to problems. The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, Dylan's second album, was released in May 1963 and was the record that really broke him after the previous one. He reached a major turning point in his career at this moment. It showcased his abilities as a talented musician and lyricist. His first album consisted mostly of cover songs, therefore this was a radical departure. All of the songs were original compositions by him. Songs on the album addressed political and social themes of the moment, as has always been his style. On this second album, Blowing in the Wind was a popular tune. During that time, The civil rights movement used this song as an anthem all across the world. Its words, which raised issues of freedom, conflict, and peace, were strong despite the song's seemingly simplistic melody. You Might Expect a Hard Rain to Fall was another popular single from the album. While the Cuban Missile Crisis was underway, Dylan wrote this song to express his fears of a nuclear holocaust. With the publication of this album, Dylan went from being only a writer to a spokesperson for the youth of today, who was finally able to become socially conscious of the problems he had been writing about. Integrating lyrical poetry into his folk music style was a crucial part of his technique. Even though Dylan had established himself at that point in the music business and was successful, he was never one to stick to just one style. In 1965, his latest album, Bringing It All Back Home, showcased this transformation. He thought this was a brilliant plan, but his audience didn't share his enthusiasm. When his performance at the 1995 Newport Folk Festival rolled around, he made the decision to include an electric band in his set. His departure from genuine folk music prompted many of his admirers to boo and get irritated. Despite the embarrassment, Dylan persisted with his new endeavor. One of his most popular songs at the time, Like a Rolling Stone, was already in the charts when he dropped it. Up Close. However, I hadn't picked them up. Every one of those famous folks they used to sing about. This song in particular peaked at number 2 on the U.S. charts and is universally regarded as one of the finest rock songs of all time. Bob Dylan was and continues to be an incredibly creative and resilient artist with an insatiable need for new experiences. Everyone who hears his music can't help but be touched by his unique sound and profoundly moving lyrics. So that we may go more deeply into the specifics of his long-awaited confession, let's examine his familial and romantic relationships. His relationship and love life. Bob Dylan's love life is the most discussed topic in rock and roll music history. There's no denying the profound effect these many partnerships have had on his professional and personal life. Suze Rotolo was one of his first significant partnerships. At the beginning of his profession, his romance with her blossomed. When they crossed paths, he was still on the cusp of finding his musical footing and hadn't yet established himself as an artist. It was in the early 1960s when they started dating, when she and Dylan appeared on the cover of Dylan's album, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. She became famous. The chronic sickness finally took its toll on Suze on February 25, 2011. Their romance began while she was a young teenager, just 17 years old. While he was living in New York City for the first time, she was his primary motivation. Dylan and their mom lived together in a little West 4th Street apartment until her death in 1962. Whether it's in an interview or Dylan's book, he almost always brings her up, talking about how enchanted he was when they first met behind the scenes at a performance. Particularly in his earlier love songs, such as Tomorrow is a Long Time and Don't Think Twice, she served as his inspiration. She was not just Dylan's love partner, but she also profoundly impacted his political consciousness and outlook. One of the main sources of inspiration for his politically charged lyrics was her active socialist politics at that period. She was engaged with the Congress of Racial Equality. Despite dating for a time, their relationship ended in 1963 because he was unable to manage his growing celebrity and the demands it placed on him while still being there for her. Sadly, she passed away before their relationship ended. As a consequence, they experienced a number of stresses and frictions, which ultimately contributed to their split. They broke up. But she stayed in New York to follow her passions for art, teaching, and book illustration. A Free Wheel in Time. Her book about her time in Greenwich Village in the 60s was finally published in 2009. Following his romance with Suze, he began dating Echo Hellstrom, his high school sweetheart, someone who had a significant impact on his formative years. Because Echo was so devoted to music, she introduced Dylan to many famous musicians and artists in the business. Many believed that his connection with Echo, the subject of his renowned song Girl from the North Country, served as an inspiration for the song. The next woman Dylan dated was Joan Baez, the folk music industry's undisputed queen at the moment. In addition to their love connection, Dylan and Baez were also quite close musically. Their romance began in 1961 and continued for several years. Their split was reported in the media prior to 1916 and 1965. Many believed that Dylan's transition to electronic music was a key factor in their split. It was also said that Baez felt that he was abandoning her because of his musical shift. Even after they officially broke up, they maintained their friendship and continued working together. Both of their contributions were important to the success of their respective fields, not to mention that Dylan's successful transition into electronic music would not have been possible without Joan Baez. Some have speculated that Baez's meeting with Dylan was a turning point in her long and successful career. Dylan apologized profusely for his treatment of Baez during their 2002 relationship in an interview. A public apology was something he chose to give her. Around the same time, Joan Baez's How Sweet the Sound, a PBS documentary, was out. Jesse, Anna, Samuel, and Jacob were born to Dylan and Sarah Lowndes, his first marriage. As part of his embrace of mixed families, Dylan adopted Maria, Sarah's daughter from a prior marriage. Ronaldo and Clara, directed by Dylan, included Sarah as well. Their 1977 marriage tragically ended in a divorce. He penned songs on his insecurities and desires for a steady home life when they were together. Problems with house renovations and Dylan's drinking became more contentious, putting strain on their relationship and exposing underlying problems that eventually led to their breakup. Despite this, Sarah continued to play a significant role in Dylan's life, serving as the muse for several songs that reflected the ups and downs of their marriage. After Dylan's marriage to Sarah ended, he began seeing Carolyn Dennis, who sang backup for him. It wasn't until 2001, with the publication of Howard Sound's biography Down the Highway, The Life of Bob Dylan, that the secret marriage between the two became public knowledge. Danny Dylan and Carolyn's daughter, Desiree Gabrielle Dennis Dylan, were born to them. A little girl named her was born in 1986. This relationship undoubtedly brought a complex aspect to Dylan's love life, even though they separated in 1992. The mysterious and intriguing nature of his private life often reflected the subject matter of his music. His love life became famous with his music because each relationship brought a new depth to his compositions. Dylan had a complicated love life. That much is certain. As a father figure, his son provides a new angle on his father figure personality, illuminating additional dimensions of the music icon's character. This was something his kid said in an interview with the NYT. From a young age, he saw his father as an attentive and supportive character who fulfilled his position as a father figure. He spoke about how, for good reasons, he worshipped his father Dylan as a child in the interview. His dad has been there for all of his childhood adventures and is still quite doting on him now. Jesse, his eldest son, corroborated this aspect of Bob Dylan after a while as well. From their early years till the present day, he and his family have been fortunate to have his father's loving and supporting presence. These introspective writings by Dylan's offstage offspring reveal not just the musician, but also the man behind the legendary status of Bob Dylan. There was that one time when Dylan acknowledged what his kids had already said, that becoming a parent changed his priorities and altered his life in every way imaginable. Even more so, he said that, apart from my family, he was uninterested in anything. By sharing their personal stories, Dylan becomes more than just a famous musician. He becomes a father figure whose impact goes much beyond the world of music and stardom. The shifting religious views of Dylan have been the subject of discussion. We may examine his religious life by looking at it. His religious life and beliefs. Among the many aspects of Bob Dylan's life that are difficult to comprehend, his spiritual path stands out as one of the most complicated. His position on religion has been characterized by transitions in his views at various times in time, as well as by periods of self-discovery and personal study, as well as by a number of instances of profound introspection. Dylan was steeped in profound Jewish teachings from the time he was a little kid. It was in May of 1954 that he celebrated his bar mitzvah as part of the Jewish tradition that his parents and extended family members were closely attached to. His parents and extended family members were firmly tied to the local Jewish customs. The purpose of this ritual was to signify his official admission into the Jewish religion, and it is often considered to be a crucial occasion in the life of any Jewish kid. This was how Dylan felt about the situation. Dylan's spiritual journey and religious views took a number of surprising twists as he moved through life, regardless of where he came from. In 1971, while he was getting close to his 30th birthday, he made the decision to go to Israel. In the course of his travels in Israel, he came into contact with Rabbi Meir Kahan, the man who was responsible for establishing the Jewish Defense League. For him, this encounter with the rabbi was a pivotal moment in the process of re-establishing his connection to his Jewish heritage. On the other hand, after this period of time, he had a conversion to the Christian religion under the direction of Mary Alice Ortiz. Instantaneously, he developed a profound devotion to the teachings of the Vineyard School of Discipleship, which is where one of the pastors, Ken Gullickson, began offering Dylan spiritual direction at that time. Regrettably, by the year 1984, he abruptly changed his mind and began to distance himself from the Christian faith. Instead, he made the decision to approach spirituality in a manner that was more personal and contemplative. It was said that he was heard underlining his opinion that life has a deeper significance that go beyond the surface level and his belief in a higher power. Dylan was able to emphasize the ways in which his music fulfilled this function for him during an interview with Newsweek. He also revealed his changing spiritual worldview. "I Saw the Light and Let Me Rest on a Peaceful Mountain" are two of Dylan's songs that shed light on his spiritual journey. Other songs, such as "I Saw the Light," also supplied insights. In spite of the complicated spiritual life he led, it was seen that he maintained a connection to his Jewish heritage by taking part in certain of their rituals in secret. A crucial incident occurred in Bob Dylan's life that led him into the depths of contemplation. Dylan is someone who has had something for self-awareness and reflection, and this event also drew him into the depths of reflection. Let's have a closer look at the specifics. The accident that changed his life. On the 29th of June in 1966, he was riding his motorbike in his neighborhood in Woodstock, New York, when he was engaged in a significant motorcycle accident that came dangerously close to taking his life. However, he suffered injuries that resulted in many vertebrae in his neck being shattered. This incident's specifics were not obvious to anybody about it. As further time passed, Dylan was questioned about this matter. Nevertheless, he declined to disclose any precise specifics about the events that transpired, because he was unable to provide this information to the general public. Several rumors circulated, which resulted in his followers and the media world expressing a variety of perspectives over the course of several years. His son was able to divulge the circumstances of this occurrence to a certain extent during an interview that took place many years later. He said that the events that transpired after the accident were odd, and that he was unable to get prompt medical assistance since there was no ambulance arriving at the scene. Due to the fact that this delay occurred, Dylan was not transferred to a hospital within the shortest amount of time. During the whole process of phoning for medical assistance, there was no one accessible to come to Dylan's rescue at that moment in his life, which added to the mystery that surrounded the tragedy. A huge transformation in his profession, family, and personal life occurred as a result of this specific experience, which marked a turning point in his life and led to big changes in reflection. During the time when all of these events were taking place, Dylan made the decision to take advantage of the time off and to avoid being in the spotlight of the media. This period of time turned out to be one of introspection and complete recuperation for him. In addition to that, he used this time to focus on other projects. The occurrence of the accident and the subsequent recuperation were both crucial events in the life of this legendary figure in the world of music. Because of this, he was able to take some time to think about his creative talents and explore them further, which helped him enter the realm of a successful return. Regardless of the many obstacles that Bob Dylan has faced throughout his life, there is no question that he has left an indelible stamp on the annals of music history. His legacy will go on forever, Let us take a quick look at his legacy and the ways in which he has continued to have an impact on the music business. Legacy and continued reflection. It was possible for him to work on a documentary film that was based on his 1966 trips while he was in the process of recovering from his injury. D.A. Pennebaker was the one who was able to capture this endeavor. Nevertheless, when it came time to show it to the public, ABC Television decided not to air the initial version because they believed it was too complicated for the typical viewer to understand. The fact that he was rejected added fuel to the fire of suspicion about his life at this time. At the point in time when he had completely healed from the accident, he made the decision to return to his apartment in Woodstock. Due to the fact that he was able to spend a significant amount of time here, he decided to devote most of his time to recording. Both his own house and the house next door, which was dubbed Big Pink, were available to him. Dylan was able to record more than 100 songs during his time at this location. However, some of the tracks that he recorded were meant to serve as demos for other artists prior to this point in time. The Basement Tapes was the title of a compilation album that Columbia Records issued in 1975 when it was released. After some time had passed, in 2014, a more complete version, dubbed The Basement Tapes Complete, was made available to the public. This comprehensive version included contributions from renowned artists such as Pete Drake, Kenny Buttrey, and Charlie McCoy. While all of these were going on, he made the decision to work with other musicians in Nashville to make an album that was going to be called John Wesley Harding. In particular, this album was well known for its concise pieces, which he said were inspired by biblical phrases and ideas in addition to the American West. All Along the Watchtower, which started receiving a lot of attention in 1967 and has since been considered one of his finest songs, was one of the songs that became very popular from the album. Dylan was confronted with the sad news of the passing of his mentor, Woody Guthrie, in addition to the accident and the successful music initiatives he carried out. This had a significant impact on him. By the 20th of January in 1968, he had made the decision to hold a memorial performance at Carnegie Hall in order to commemorate the influence of Woody Guthrie. After the publication of Dylan's song named Murder Most Foul in March of 2020, audiences were taken aback by the extraordinary creative abilities of Dylan. This particular song, which was based on the well-known killing of President John F. Kennedy, was 17 minutes long, in contrast to his previous songs that he had released up to this point, which were typically shorter. The fact that Dylan was able to achieve the top spot on the Rock Digital song sales list on Billboard is evidence of the significance of this song for him. Immediately after the announcement of that breakthrough, it was revealed that 2 new singles would be released, namely False Prophet and I Contain Multitudes. By the time June 2020 rolled around, Rough and Rowdy Ways had been released, and it quickly climbed to the top of the album list in the United Kingdom. By virtue of this remarkable accomplishment, Dylan was recognized as the oldest artist to gain the highest position on the list with wholly new material. Regrettably, by December of that same year, he made the decision to sell all of the rights and management associated with his entire song collection, for a total of more than $300 million. Universal Music Publishing Group purchased each and every one of them. During the month of May 2021, when he became 80 years old, he conducted a virtual conference that was called Dylan 80. The conference included a number of contributions from a variety of individuals, including academics, journalists, artists, and others from a variety of backgrounds. After that, in the year 2021, he was able to capture his audience with a live broadcast that lasted for 50 minutes and was dubbed Shadow Kingdom. The stream included early songs by Bob Dylan. Following that, his bootleg series was launched. And then in September of the same year, Springtime in New York was released. All of this labor was then followed by a one-of-a-kind version of Blowing in the Wind, which was recorded utilizing the cutting-edge Ionic original media. During the auction that took place in July of 2022, this piece acquired a considerable amount of money. Each and every one of them is evidence of the impact and influence that Bob Dylan has established over the course of his career. You should click the next video that appears on your screen, as well as like and subscribe to this video if you find it entertaining.